So good morning and welcome. I'm so happy to be with my Dharma sister, Ayya Santacitta, and she is just back from a sabbatical where she's been teaching in Austria, heading towards Aloka Vihara in California. And her special area of creativity is Ecco Dharma. So she's going to lead us in a meditation this morning, and then we'll have a sense of how she's thinking about this, and I'll ask her some of the questions that we've been exploring in our discussion during her visit here, and then time for a group discussion. So, Venerable.
Thank you. So how long should the meditation be?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So, please find a posture which is relaxed and alert. And I'm just gonna, make a guided meditation on the elements. And because we have only 10 minutes, we're just gonna do earth element. And, the Buddha's teaching doesn't tell us what earth element is, but it gives us a handle on how we can experience it directly for ourselves. And, the best way to come into this is to press our teeth together and experience the hardness, the structure of the bones, because the teeth are considered the tips of the bones. So having that direct experience of hardness, of structure. And before we continue with the meditation, just remembering one more time, why have you come today? Why do you meditate actually? Just shortly bring that back to mind. And then coming back to the hardness of the teeth as you press them together. And then we're just gonna do a body scan, and the 4 elements is a practice in the first of the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the 4 satipatthana, which are the basic template for meditation in the Buddha's teaching. First is body, second one is feeling tones, third one is mind states, and the 4th one makes clear the conditionality of the first 3. Contemplation of Dhammas. So let's just start at the very beginning, at the simplicity of having a body which is made up of the elements. So this body is actually only borrowed from the elements. It's a riding animal for the consciousness. And if we really understand that this body is only borrowed for a certain amount of time, then we can train ourselves to get ready to give it back when the time comes to give it back. And to also really deeply understand that we are not separate from the rest of the elements. We are not separate from this planet. We are part of it, and through that we are part of the whole universe. And this meditation helps us to have that direct experience, and through that repetition of that direct experience we get, the mind adapts and lets go of certain concepts, of certain ideas about what this body is, and lets go of certain attachment to views, and that's why we meditate. So now coming back to the top of the head and feeling the skull, the hardness of the skull. And then sweeping down towards the neck, hardness, the vertebrae in the neck, and then be coming down further to the shoulders, shoulder bones, hardness, earth element, then we come to one upper arm, hardness, the bones in the arm, earth element. Lower arm, earth element. Hand, earth element. And then the other upper arm, earth element. Lower arm, earth element. Hand, earth element. And the torso with the spine and the rib cage, earth element. The pelvis, hardness of the bones in the pelvis, earth element. One upper leg, earth element. Lower leg, earth element. Foot, earth element. The other upper leg, earth element. Lower leg, earth element. And the second foot, earth element. The whole body is permeated by earth element. Earth element internally and earth element externally, as the mountains and the stones outside, or in the walls of our house, of our room. It's all exactly the same earth element. Earth element is empty, empty of a self. And if we don't ingest earth element in food for 1 or 2 months, this body is going to collapse. It cannot sustain itself. It's in constant exchange with everything else. That's a direct experience of emptiness, really. Or not self, how it's called in the Theravada, anatta. So this very simple meditation opens a Dhamma door for us. And the same, water element. The whole body is also permeated by water element. We can become aware of it in the flesh, where the blood is coursing and other liquids. And if we don't drink for 4 or 5 days, the body shuts down, because water element internally and water element externally in the rivers and the rains, the oceans, the lakes is exactly the same water element. Water element is empty, empty of a self. And then the fire element, which you can feel on the skin, where the skin meets the outer air in the room. We can feel temperature, or in the mouth, the heat. Fire element. The whole body is permeated by fire element. And this body can only exist in a certain range of temperature. If it's too cold, the water freezes. If it's too hot, it evaporates. And then the body is collapsing. Heat element internally, fire element internally, fire element externally, as it comes from the sun and from the fossil fuels. It's exactly the same fire element. Fire element is empty, empty of a self. And the last one is the air element, which we can connect with wind element through the breathing. If we don't breathe for 3 minutes, the body is going to shut down. Coming to the breath, breathing in and breathing out. Really allowing that to sink in, that this body is just borrowed from the elements. And that, in order to respond to what's going on the planet right now, we need to connect to our deeper origins. That we are really part of the living body of the earth. And through that, part of the greater cosmos. And we need to become more vulnerable to be really able to consciously experience that connection and non-separation. We really need to look into that direction and allow ourselves to be changed through very simple exercises. And come back to that frequently. Because, really waking up to that vulnerability, to that non-separation, that at the same time, holds a great power for becoming invulnerable through realizing non-separation, which is just another way of saying realizing full awakening. So I think that's the end of the meditation. So coming back to the body and slowly opening your eyes. Being really allowing oneself to be part of something much bigger than ourselves, and do that, come back to that truth again and again, and remembering it. A wonder of belonging, I think, that can be called, because we often feel so lost and, not really at home in our bodies or on the planet. So through that exercise, we can straighten out that conditioning and through a very simple exercise, counteract the confusion. Thank you.
So we're at a very special time as living beings in our world. And Ayya Santacitta, you are identifying Ecco Dharma as one of your main focuses of teaching. How would you express the way you are bringing the principles of the Dharma to this particular understanding for this moment?
So, if what I think that the teachings of the Buddha are all about, like essentially is really about that we learn to see how we are relating to our experience. What are we bringing on top to, what bringing extra to our experience in terms of greed, aversion, and confusion. And I think if that's, if you're like, let's say you're sitting down with a cup of coffee and then you're just watching your mind, what's coming up. Is there greed? Do you want it? Is there aversion? Do you not want it? Or not clear, how to relate to it? And I think with the whole climate situation, in a way, it's the same thing. Can we really allow ourselves to open to what's going on in the world, what we are hearing, what we are reading, and we don't need to, go through the whole material which is available, but just to the clarity that our planet is changing, and because we are part of it, we need to change with it. We need to adapt to different conditions. And for example, what has changed is that we have many more people living on the same planet compared with just 100 years ago. And also, our technology has given us powers which can become really dangerous, if our ethical maturity is not in sync with the powers we have got. And so it's actually not, it doesn't require a lot of intellectual capacity to understand, what is in the process of going ever more wrong, but it does need a real taking interest in the situation, and taking interest in the situation requires us to become more sensitive, so we can really start to understand, where we can actually make a difference, and then invest our energy in that direction. And I feel, that's what I'd like to put more into the center of the teaching, because I feel, that the Buddha's teaching has already everything in it what we need in order to attend to the situation. The first question is, how do I deal with what is coming up? What do I do with it? Do I turn towards it, or do I distract myself? That's something we can very quickly ascertain if we look at our minds. And then, where am I right now, and where do I want to go? And then what would fit into that in order to realize that? So it's not, it's not as complicated as it might look. And then making steps in that direction, supporting efforts in that direction. And I feel, what is the most pressing question at the moment is, that we as Homo sapiens, what we need to do, we need to let go of our addiction to fossil fuels. And that's not something which will be an easy process. But it's not the first time, that there has been made really big changes were necessary, and they have happened in the past. They can happen again. But I think there need to be enough of us who are really with that transition. That doesn't mean, that you necessarily have to go out now and build something. But I think what is really important, that we open our minds towards that, and that we speak about it, we relate to other people about it, we stop, we stop distracting ourselves from the urgency, really. And, as you might know, the American president has actually a very special right, which is called the Defense Production Act, and which was already used, at the beginning of the Second World War, after bombing of Pearl Harbor, where, lots of industries in America were turned around, and they were producing machinery, to go to war. Because in a way it is a war, it's a war against our own old worldviews. And I think this, using this Defense Production Act would enable, the President of the United States to declare a climate and ecological emergency, and then, use this act to really make a concerted effort to end the era of fossil fuels. And because America is a very, very influential country in the world, it's just a very powerful country, I think that would also really make a big impact on many other countries. And basically what we need to do, we need to get off those fossil fuels, and we need to implement a rapid transition to renewable energies. And as we can see, our leaders alone won't make it. We need to pressurize them. And that's what we all can do, But first we need to really take it in how important it is, and that we all need to do this together. We can't just sit back and think that somebody somewhere is going to do it. And that's, what I'd like to make part of the way how I teach the Dhamma, to really use mindfulness, or sati, how we call it in the Pali language, or also awareness, to really use that in a big context now, because I feel it's our responsibility as people who really want to wake up and live the Buddha's teaching. We can't only be concerned with our little kind of niche in life, because sooner or later we're gonna be either washed out of it by um, rising waters, or us in I live in California, we're gonna our monastery was already touched by the wildfires last September. We have lost 2 outbuildings, so we are in the middle of it. And I think we need all together to rise up and to speak about it, and there needs to be just much more concern, and because also we are living in patriarchy, we have kind of this inbuilt unconscious assumption that there is somebody who is going to fix it for us, but we are the ones we are waiting for, and that's also so important. When we do this meditation on the elements, I feel it becomes very clear, we are all in the same boat. We are all in the same boat, and there we have different functions, to fulfill as we cross over the ocean of samsara. And there is the politicians, and there is the people who are kind of empowering the politicians, and we really have to pressurize them, and we have to do that in a way which is wise and compassionate. And I think we have a very good framework from which to start this process, but I think it's really time for us to rise up. And the Dharma teachers of the Theravada schools, which are mainly at the moment still teaching in America at IMS and Spirit Rock, we are in the process of forming what's called People's Alliance of Earth Action now, and the acronym for it is PIAN. The word PIAN means like hymn, it's an old word. People's Alliance for Earth Action Now, and that's exactly what we want to try to do, is to support people for sacred activism, sacred climate activism, to go onto the streets in a non-violent way, just sitting, just raising awareness.
Can you talk a little more about sacred activism and what Pian is recommending?
Yeah, so Pian was just like founded in January, so it's just at the very beginning, But at the moment, what we are planning is, for example, to have like regular days where certain groups of people in different locations. It will be decentralized, and it's gonna be small local groups who can connect with each other, like a web. And going on the street in a non-verbal way, and just like walking, having little flyers to hand out, doing walking meditation, sitting meditation, and then have an open mic if people want to say something. And then I myself, when I return to California at the beginning of May, I want to look into we are having a forest monastery, and I'm going to look to coming back, making a little branch in town. And I would like to make a branch which is called like Earth Room, where I would like to, make a shrine room, which in its design, in its decoration, in the symbolism and so on, which brings out that coming together of the Buddha's teachings and the teachings of the earth, and how they can mutually support each other. And I think, that verbal communication is just a small part of communication, but I think, a visual communication through symbols, through art, is incredibly powerful. And I would just like to update, some of the Asian Buddhist symbolism through combining it with what I have just been speaking about. And I'm just in the process of starting with this. And over the last few days, I've been speaking with Khenmo about it. We meet from time to time. We are friends, since about 2009, and just been speaking about that with her, and how she sees that and so on. And Khenmo was an artist, before she became a nun, and I'm sure she's an artist still. And I myself have also been in arts before I became a nun, so we have something we can meet on that level very well. And Khenmo has invited me to speak. I have never spoken about that in public yet, because it's just like something I started to become more inspired by during my sabbatical. I was mainly in Austria. I'm from Austria. I spent a lot of time in Vienna, which is a very old ground to be on, and it's like an open air museum in a way. And I'm coming back now with ideas, and I think it's important to use everything we have got to make the transition. And I think art is just one very powerful tool we have as human beings. We should not leave any stones unturned. We need everything we have got to help us to make the transition. As the whole planet is going into a transition, we also need to change, because we are part of the planet. We are not separate. It's not like a stage we are walking around on, but we are part of the planet. And this meditation, on the elements, as simple as it is, makes it super clear.
So one of the things that we were talking about in terms of, of course, people have been active and forming groups and doing ecology for a long time now. So the different things that the Dharma can bring are significant. And one of the things we talked about is understanding the interconnection of mind and what we experience, and the relationship of the early teachings of Buddha, of the origin of the reality as we understand it now. Do you want to say something about that origin?
There are some suttas in the Digha Nikaya which speak about, that at the beginning human beings were living on the planet and they were just eating basically earth. And that was a very tasty, sweet earth they were eating. And then, they started to, some of them started to store it up. And then strife came out of that. So it's the three poisons, as you have the same concept in the Vajrayana, the three poisons: greed, aversion, and delusion. How they actually rob completely, what's the right word here? I just know the English word right now, that they distort our experience of who we are, and then if we don't know anymore who we are and we experience ourselves as separate from the planet, then there is no longer the relationship conscious in which we really are with this planet. And then we start to treat the planet in the way we are treating it right now, which is to our own detriment as well. And it's that insight which is so central, in Buddhism. The insight into emptiness is liberating, but not only, in terms of the rounds of rebirth, but it's the same thing, that if we want to live in accordance with nature, we also need to let go of that deep, misguided belief into being separate.
And in the text that we have in the Tibetan tradition, it's expressed very similarly. And what's so interesting about that origin myth, it's people started getting afraid. What if it doesn't come tomorrow, the food?
Mm-hmm.
And then they started storing a little bit, and then more and more and more, and then fighting. And if I remember correctly, they used to live long, long lives. And when they
Yeah.
got afraid and started fighting,
Shorter and shorter.
the lives were shorter and shorter. So
Yeah.
this ignorance affected the whole reality of the planet they lived on. And because we see and understand the relationship between our minds, our karma that we're creating by our action, and what we're experiencing, we can see the interconnection between living simply and letting go of that fear to the actual moment-to-moment experience that we have.
Yeah, and then also, then people, started to fight more and more, and their lifespans became shorter and shorter. And then, some people, they hid away in the caves. They went into the mountains and hid away. And then afterwards, when everything was finished, they came out again. And then they said, the first thing what they were saying is, let's make a promise to each other, we won't kill. And then how it all then it started all over again, because people had seen the, what was created through greed, hatred, and delusion. Then they wanted to live according to what we call sila, or the 5 precepts, and made it very clear, that this is a basic, very important agreement we need to have with each other and with the planet itself, really.
And so by looking at that ancient story, seeing how our world came to be as we experience now, it also is teaching us about the continuous impermanence and change, but also how turning towards that which we fear with curiosity then allows what we can't predict to emerge. So can you talk about your understanding of emergence?
Yeah, I think, I have taken a little note here, we know from system theory that this creative potential of emergent properties typically manifests in times of greatest stress, So in times of greatest stress, like in personal relationships, but also in our relationship to the planet, if we have enough mindfulness and awareness, that we can, in times of great stress, turn towards that experience with interest and include the fear in the interest, then we really do have a chance that some new insights will emerge because of the pressure of the stress, So that's why it's so important for us to really look, because that's our only way for new things to emerge, because we can't really, quote unquote, fix all of those problems from inside the old way of looking, as you were just saying, but we have to actually use the pressure of the stress to help us. It's like birth pangs, and to really use that to support us in, realizing that we don't have to intellectually think that all through, because it's impossible. But we have to realize that we need to step out from that way of doing and thinking, and we have to allow that much greater intelligence, the evolutionary spirit or biointelligence, or however we want to call it, which is working through this planet since billions of years, and it hasn't needed our little brains for that. We are just like part of that process. But we need to make some space into our hearts, rather, the chitta, the heart mind, for these new ways of relating and being to emerge. And out of that, these actions then will arise, which will help us to reach a different way of being in the world. And for example, to come off the addiction to fossil fuels, which is the most important thing on the agenda in the material realm,
So one of the things in our early discussions this week, we were talking about All right, how many years have we been talking about the earth crisis and climate change and all these things, and talking. How is it that's still at the talking level? And so one of your aspects of the significance of bringing the Dharma to it is we can talk about it, but we still are putting our heads in the sand or under the blankets, however you want to see. It's this not wanting to see what we're afraid of, and or distracting ourselves so that we don't have to think about it. So these are the things that we talk about in meditation all the time, about looking at our own anger, our own greed, or all of those things. And so if we bring these same principles to how we're working with the earth, it's a gentle approach of applying mindfulness so that people don't go into the suicidal hopelessness or overwhelm, but let's look, see, feel, sit with, and see what arises.
Yeah, and and seeing that this is not like a responsibility or like a personal responsibility of one person, but it's more like we are part of the species called Homo sapiens sapiens, which means like wise man or wise woman, and the word sapiens comes actually from the Latin word sapere, which means to taste. And you know how little babies, when they're very young, they take everything in their mouth in order to know what it is. This really to come into a very intimate relationship with what it means to be alive at this time. And I think, through the meditation tools, we already have the tools, but we have to apply it to everything, not just like when we do the session, when we do the sadhana, when we do the practice, but really to our whole life. And I think this is why, it is a spiritual disease, we all have, but it's not like that we are bad because we have it. It's just like part of the growing up of us, us to truly be a Homo sapiens sapiens. We have to just do the next step now. And I feel, that the whole situation on the earth is actually really compelling us. There is no way out. There's maybe a few like Elon Musks who can make a life on Mars or something, but it's not an option, for all of us. Forget about it. That's not an option. He can go if he needs to go, but we're gonna stay here, and we can really. I think we can really trust that fact, that the creative potential of these emergent properties which will come to us is if we have enough courage, and also holding together as a sangha, as a society, that we go into that process together and allow emergence to inform us, because emergence has been taking care of this evolutionary process since billions of years. Why should it stop now? There's no reason to assume that it needs to stop now. If you think, like 4 billion years ago when this planet started to form, now we can communicate like on an iPad, on a computer like this. There's a vast intelligence, working through all of this. And we need to learn to align ourselves with it, and I feel, to work towards full awakening, to let go of greed, aversion, and delusion is the way how we are more and more aligning ourselves. And it is exactly, what's offered to us in the Buddha's teaching. But now it's even more relevant because it also can support us to be able to respond to the climate crisis, which is not going to go away. It's getting more and more. And as Khenmo said, we're speaking about it since 30, 40 years. But, we are slowly edging our way towards where we need to go. It takes time. It takes time. But it's not something, we can personally each, take total responsibility for, but we all do our part. And at the same time, if we're doing our part, we also progress spiritually, and it's not, it's all one, it's all one process.
So I know we have considerable expertise in this small group, and then of course we're part of the Drikung lineage, and we have the great leadership of His Holiness Drikung Khabgyal Chetsang Rinpoche. He's heading towards Ladakh, I suspect, for Earth Day, but we have been giving information all along about his extraordinary project in India and Ladakh and all over the world as a mountain ambassador for the UN. So we'll go into discussion, but then from his wise words of, if we are on the Bodhisattva path, then the greatest thing we can do is take care of the planet, because the planet supports all of the living beings. And so every action can be addressed towards the planet in all our focus and in our heart mind, seeing that it is the place of the greatest good. And this spring in Ladakh, I think they're planting 100,000 trees, so that the total is at this point something like 1 million trees over the past 11 years, as well as making a dying bioregion into a sustainable region. So we have more of that on our website, and if you could go Green India, you'll find information about that. So ongoing discussion, ongoing focus, but thoughts and reflections. I'm going to change it into gallery view, and we'll say goodbye to the Facebook friends. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So in this way, our group discussions, people are assured that they're private. And let me just let go of Facebook. There we go. So thoughts or reflections that you'd like to express this morning, or questions, Ayya Santacitta, of her new projects? You can raise your hand or wave. Yes, Susan, you need to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Thank you so much for offering this talk and inspiration. Hello, Ayya Santacitta. So happy to see that you're, can you see me?
Yes.
Your trip in Austria went well. I followed that on Facebook. I hope to see you in a month or so in California.
Yeah.
My question is, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that you're incorporating art into this. Sometimes being an artist, I feel as though just being stuck in a room, and doing my artwork, when I could be out being more active, is a dilemma for myself, that I need to be doing more than creating images. So I was very happy to hear you to bring artwork into this much needed area of activism. I don't really talk about my artwork that I'm doing too much, but I would like to hear about what your ideas are in bringing artwork more into this element, and how other people who are artists can join in. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a bit premature for me to speak much about it, because I need to first, speak with my board and everything. But I'd like to use some contemporary art to make a shrine room, which is not so dominated by, Asian images from the Middle Ages. Basically, that's my basic thought about that. Yeah.
And Jeff, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, that was a really amazing talk. It really shifted things for me in thinking about how all of us are really just dirt, water, sunlight, and somehow we have this consciousness that emerges, but it really helps me thinking about how or question, what is this self that somehow I think of? I'm really interested in the Paean network you mentioned. I want to find out more about that. And